My name is Rose. And the moment my sister's hand connected with my face in the middle of LAX Terminal 4, I knew my life would never be the same. The sharp crack echoed through the departure lounge like a gunshot. 100 pairs of eyes turned toward us. Children stopped crying. Conversations died mid-sentence. My cheek burned, but not as much as the humiliation spreading through my chest like wildfire. She stood there, her designer handbag still swinging from the momentum. Her perfectly manicured finger pointed at my face like a weapon. "You selfish bitch!" she hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You've ruined everything!" Have you ever been betrayed by someone you thought would protect you forever? Let me back up, because nothing in life happens in a vacuum, and this story doesn't start at an airport. It starts 28 years ago when my mother held two baby girls in her arms and promised to love us equally. My sister Claire came first, 8 minutes before me. Those 8 minutes somehow became a lifetime of difference in my parents' eyes. Claire was the golden child, the perfect one, the daughter who could do no wrong. I was the afterthought, the shadow, the one who was always just slightly disappointing no matter how hard I tried. We grew up in San Diego in a house that looked perfect from the outside. My father owned a successful commercial real estate company, and my mother played the role of society wife with practiced precision. Claire thrived in that environment. She knew how to smile at the right moments, say the right things, wear the right clothes. She understood the game instinctively. I didn't. I was too honest, too blunt, too much of everything that made my parents uncomfortable. By the time we were teenagers, the difference was stark. Claire got a convertible for her 16th birthday. I got a lecture about being more grateful for what I had. But I loved my sister despite everything. That's the thing people don't understand about family dynamics. You can recognize the inequality and still crave connection. Claire was my twin, my other half. And somewhere deep inside, I believed that eventually we'd find our way back to each other as equals. I was wrong about a lot of things back then, but I was especially wrong about that. The real story begins 3 years ago when my father died suddenly of a heart attack at 62. He left behind a complicated estate and even more complicated family dynamics. The will was straightforward on paper. The business would be divided between Claire and me, 50-50. The house would go to our mother with provisions for both of us. Various investments and properties would be split evenly. It looked fair in black and white. But my father had also left something else. A separate trust, established years before his death, contained the majority of his liquid assets, about $8 million. The trust named me as the primary beneficiary with a letter explaining why. I found out about it 2 weeks after the funeral when the estate attorney called me into his office alone. He handed me the letter with gentle eyes, like he knew what was coming. My father's words were simple and devastating. He wrote that he'd watched me struggle for years to earn their approval while Claire coasted on natural charm and their favoritism. He wrote that he was ashamed of how he'd treated me, how he'd let my mother's preference for Claire poison his own relationship with me. He wrote that this trust was his way of trying to balance the scales, to give me the financial security I deserved after years of emotional neglect. He wrote that he loved me and he was sorry. I sat in that attorney's office and cried for an hour. The attorney advised me to keep the trust quiet, to let the main estate settle first before revealing this additional asset. He said it would reduce conflict. I should have listened to him. Instead, I told my mother and Claire that same evening because I still believed in honesty, in family, in working things out together. I actually thought they'd understand. My mother's face went blank, like someone had turned off a light behind her eyes. Claire stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "That's not possible," she said. "Daddy wouldn't do that. You're lying." I showed them the letter. My mother read it twice, her lips moving silently, then carefully folded it and handed it back to me. "Your father wasn't thinking clearly toward the end," she said. "We'll contest this." They did contest it. For 2.5 years, they dragged me through legal hell. They hired expensive lawyers and forensic accountants. They claim my father had been mentally incompetent when he established the trust. They suggested I had manipulated him, even though the trust was created when I was in college, long before his death. They painted me as a scheming daughter who had poisoned her own father against his family. The irony was suffocating. I was the one who had visited him every week in his last years, while Claire was too busy with her social calendar. I was the one who sat with him during his chemotherapy for the cancer he beat 5 years before his heart gave out. I was the one who actually knew him as a person, not just as a wallet. But none of that mattered in their narrative. They needed me to be the villain to justify their rage. And rage it was. My mother stopped speaking to me entirely. Claire's calls and texts turned vicious. "You killed him," one message read. "Your greed gave him that heart attack." Another said, "I hope you choke on every dollar, you parasite." I tried to maintain the relationship. I invited them to Thanksgiving, to Christmas, to my birthday. Every invitation went unanswered. I sent flowers on Mother's Day and Claire's birthday. They were returned. I called and got voicemail. I showed up at the house and the door stayed locked. They froze me out completely while simultaneously trying to destroy me in court. The legal battle consumed everything. My relationship with my boyfriend collapsed under the stress. My graphic design business suffered because I couldn't focus. I lost weight, lost sleep, lost pieces of myself I'm still trying to find. But I didn't give up. I had something they didn't have: the truth and lawyers who could prove it. 18 months ago, the judge ruled in my favor. The trust was valid, established when my father was demonstrably of sound mind, and I was the rightful beneficiary. My mother and Claire were ordered to pay my legal fees, which totaled close to $400,000. The judge's written opinion was scathing. He called their case frivolous and motivated by greed rather than genuine concern. I thought that would be the end of it. I actually believed we might find a way to heal after the legal noise quieted down. I was naive enough to hope that losing in court might force them to confront their own behavior, and maybe, just maybe, we could start over. Instead, they blame me harder. In their minds, I hadn't just won a legal case. I had stolen their money, corrupted the judge, destroyed the family. Claire started a whisper campaign among my father's old business associates and our extended family. She told anyone who would listen that I had manipulated a dying man and turned him against his own wife and eldest daughter. She was convincing too, because Claire had always known how to tell a story. I lost friends who believed her version. I lost business connections. My father's brother stopped returning my calls. Cousins I'd grown up with unfriended me on social media. Claire was systematic about it, calculated. She wanted to destroy not just my inheritance, but my entire life. Through all of this, my mother stayed silent in public, but supported Claire's vendetta behind the scenes. I know this because my mother's credit cards paid for some of Claire's legal expenses, even after the court case ended. I know this because the private investigator Claire hired to dig up dirt on me sent his invoices to my mother's address. I found out about it during discovery in a defamation case I eventually filed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The airport incident happened about 10 months ago, after nearly a year of cold silence between us. Out of nowhere, Claire called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice was different, softer, almost fragile. She said she'd been doing therapy, working through her anger and grief. She said she wanted to try to repair our relationship. She suggested a sister's trip, just the two of us, to Hawaii. A week in Maui to talk, to heal, to maybe find our way back to each other. I wanted to believe her so badly. That's the thing about family trauma. Even when you know better, even when every rational part of your brain is screaming danger, there's still this desperate child inside you hoping for love and acceptance. So I said yes. I booked my ticket. I bought new clothes for the trip. I let myself imagine long walks on the beach and honest conversations. And maybe, finally, a sister who saw me as an equal. Claire suggested we meet at LAX since we were both flying out of Los Angeles. She said it would be easier to go through security together, to sit together on the plane. It made sense. Everything she said made sense. That should have been my first clue. I arrived at the airport an hour before our flight, excited and nervous and hopeful. I spotted Claire near the check-in counter, wearing white linen pants and a silk tank top, looking like she'd stepped out of a vacation catalog. She saw me and smiled, and for just a second, I saw my sister, my twin, the girl who used to share secrets with me in the dark of our bedroom. Then her face changed. She walked toward me quickly, her heels clicking on the polished floor. People moved out of her way instinctively. She stopped 2 feet in front of me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, the same one she'd worn since high school. "You actually came," she said, and her voice was ice. "Claire, what?" That's when she hit me. Her palm struck my cheek with enough force to snap my head sideways. The pain was sharp and immediate, but the shock was worse. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Around us, the airport went silent. Someone gasped. A child started crying. "You selfish bitch," Claire said, her voice rising to a shout. "You've ruined everything." She turned to the crowd gathering around us, playing to them like an actress on stage. "This is my sister. She stole my father's money, poisoned him against our family, and now she has the nerve to show up here like nothing happened." I found my voice finally, though it came out shakier than I wanted. "Claire, stop. That's not what happened, and you know it. Don't you dare lie to these people." She was crying now, real tears streaming down her face. She'd always been able to cry on command. "You're a con artist and a thief. You destroyed our mother, you destroyed me, and you won't get away with it." Security was moving toward us now, 2 officers in uniform cutting through the crowd. I felt my face burning, felt hundreds of eyes on me, felt the weight of public judgment crushing down. Someone was filming us on their phone. The video would probably be online within an hour. "Ma'am, we need you both to calm down," one of the security officers said, positioning himself between us. Claire turned her tears on him. "Officer, thank God. This woman has been harassing my family for years. She's dangerous. I have a restraining order." She pulled a folded paper from her purse with theatrical precision. I felt the ground shift under my feet. "What? That's insane. Claire, there's no restraining order. You called me. You invited me on this trip." "I've never spoken to her in months," Claire said to the officer, her voice shaking with manufactured fear. "She's been stalking me, calling me constantly, showing up at my house. I had to get legal protection. And now she's followed me here." The security officer looked at the paper, then at me. His expression shifted from neutral to suspicious. "Ma'am, I need to see your identification." Everything that happened next felt like watching myself in a movie. The officers separated us. They verified Claire's restraining order, which was real, which had been filed 3 weeks earlier, claiming I'd been harassing and threatening her. They checked my ticket. They questioned me about why I was at the airport. Every answer I gave sounded weak and defensive even to my own ears. Claire stood 20 feet away, surrounded by sympathetic travelers, crying delicately into a tissue someone had offered her. She'd played this perfectly. She'd invited me to the airport knowing she had a restraining order in place. She created a public spectacle designed to humiliate me and make me look like the aggressor. And she'd done it all in front of cameras and witnesses. I didn't get arrested, but only because I cooperated fully and because my lawyer, who I called immediately, was able to explain the situation and show the officers my phone records proving Claire had called me. But I also didn't get on a plane to Hawaii. I got escorted out of the airport while people whispered and stared. The video of Claire slapping me and calling me a thief went viral on social media. Within 24 hours, it had over 2 million views. The comments were brutal. People who knew nothing about the situation except a 90-second video called me every name imaginable. They said I deserved to be slapped, They said I looked like someone who would steal from family. They said Claire was brave for standing up to me. The internet had convicted me without trial based on Claire's performance and her tears. I sat in my apartment that night, watching the video replay over and over on different platforms, and something inside me finally broke. Not broke like shattered, but broke like a bone that sets stronger after it heals. I'd spent 3 years trying to be reasonable, trying to extend olive branches, trying to prove I was a good person who deserved to be treated fairly. None of it had mattered. Claire and my mother had decided I was the enemy, and they wouldn't stop until they destroyed me completely. So I stopped trying to be reasonable. I decided to fight back. The first thing I did was hire a crisis management firm that specialized in online reputation. They cost a fortune, but I had a fortune now, and I was done pretending money didn't matter. Within 48 hours, they traced the spread of the video and identified several fake social media accounts created specifically to amplify negative comments about me. The accounts all traced back to an IP address that belonged to my mother's house. The second thing I did was unleash my lawyers. Not defensively this time, but aggressively. We filed a defamation suit against Claire for her false public statements at the airport and online. We filed a motion to dissolve the fraudulent restraining order, presenting evidence that Claire had initiated contact with me. We sent a cease and desist letter to my mother regarding the fake social media accounts. And we did it all publicly, with press releases and court filings that told my side of the story in clear documented detail. The third thing I did was start investigating Claire's life. I hired the same private investigator she'd used against me. I told him I wanted to know everything: her finances, her relationships, her business dealings. I wanted to understand what was really driving this vendetta beyond simple sibling rivalry and inheritance disputes. What he found was devastating. Claire was broke, completely, utterly broke. The lifestyle she projected, the designer clothes, the luxury car, the expensive apartment, all of it was built on credit cards and loans she couldn't repay. She'd burned through her half of my father's estate in less than 2 years on frivolous purchases and bad investments. She owed over $300,000 in debt, with creditors threatening lawsuits. But it was worse than simple financial mismanagement. Claire had been stealing from my father's company. Before his death, she'd been the office manager, handling day-to-day operations. The investigator found evidence of systematic embezzlement going back 5 years. She created fake vendor accounts and paid herself under different business names. She'd written company checks for personal expenses. She'd stolen close to $500,000 over time. My father probably discovered it before he died. That's why he changed his will. That's why he created the trust for me. He knew Claire was a thief, and he was trying to protect the family assets from her. But he died before he could confront her or report it, and in his death, she'd managed to pin her own crimes on me. I sat with that information for a week, feeling sick and angry and somehow still sad. This was my sister, my twin, the person who should have been my closest ally in the world. And she was not just betraying me, but betraying the memory of our father, stealing from him even as she claimed to be defending his legacy. The investigator had more. He'd found evidence that Claire had been having an affair with my ex-boyfriend Marcus, the one I'd been with during the first year of the court battle. The relationship had started before Marcus and I broke up. They'd been seeing each other secretly for months. Claire had deliberately seduced him to get information about my legal strategy and to destabilize my personal life. When I confronted Marcus about it later, he admitted everything. He said Claire had approached him at a bar, had been charming and interested and available at a time when I was stressed and distant. He said he was sorry, but that Claire had made him feel special. I almost laughed at that. Claire had always known how to make people feel special right before she destroyed them. Armed with all this information, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just defend myself anymore. I was going to dismantle the false narrative Claire had built piece by piece, and I was going to do it in a way that left no room for doubt or sympathy. The defamation trial was scheduled for 6 months after the airport incident. My lawyers advised settling. Claire's lawyers were desperate to settle. They knew the evidence we had, knew that discovery would expose not just the defamation, but all of Claire's other dirty secrets. They offered to have Claire publicly apologize and pay damages if I'd agree to keep the rest quiet. I said no. The trial lasted 3 weeks. We presented everything. Phone records showing Claire had contacted me and invited me to the airport. Security footage proving she'd been waiting for me specifically. The fake restraining order and evidence it was filed in bad faith. Expert testimony about the social media campaign against me. Character witnesses who testified about Claire's history of manipulation. Financial records showing her embezzlement from my father's company. Text messages between Claire and Marcus discussing me. All of it. In open court. In public record where everyone could see. Claire tried to maintain her victim persona at first. She cried on the stand. She claimed I was vindictive and cruel. She said I was trying to destroy her because I'd always been jealous of her. But under cross-examination, she fell apart. My lawyer was relentless, catching her in lie after lie, presenting document after document that contradicted her testimony. The moment I'll remember forever came on day 18. My lawyer asked Claire directly, "Did you or did you not steal over $480,000 from your father's company between 2016 and 2021? Claire looked at her lawyer. She looked at my mother sitting in the gallery. She looked at me, and then she said, "He owed me that money. He loved Rose more, so he owed me." The courtroom went silent. Even her own lawyer looked shocked. She just admitted to felony embezzlement on the stand, in front of cameras and court reporters and a judge. My lawyer pressed on. "And did you or did not orchestrate the confrontation at LAX specifically to humiliate your sister and damage her reputation?" Claire's mask finally dropped completely. "She deserved it," she spat. "She deserved everything I did to her. She took what was mine." "Your father's money was yours?" "Yes, I'm the oldest. I'm the one who mattered. Rose was always just the backup plan. She should have been grateful for scraps, but instead, she turned Daddy against me. She poisoned him. She ruined everything." She kept going, unraveling in real time, admitting to the social media campaign, to seducing Marcus, to the fraudulent restraining order. She admitted all of it with this twisted logic that made her the victim and me the villain, no matter what facts said otherwise. It was painful to watch, not because I felt sorry for her, but because I was watching my sister destroy herself, and some small part of me still wished things could have been different. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found in my favor on all counts. The judge awarded me $2.3 million in damages, one of the largest defamation judgments in California history. He also referred Claire's testimony to the district attorney for criminal prosecution regarding the embezzlement, but the money wasn't the victory. The victory was watching the truth come out, watching the lies disintegrate, watching everyone who'd believed Claire's story see exactly who she really was. The video of her courtroom breakdown went viral just like the airport video had. But this time, the comments were different. This time, people understood. My mother sat through every day of that trial. She never testified. Claire's lawyers didn't call her because they knew what she'd have to say under oath, knew that she'd been complicit in everything. On the last day, after the verdict was read, I watched her leave the courthouse with Claire. She looked old suddenly, diminished, like she'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. She looked at me once just before they got into their car, and I saw something that might have been regret. But she didn't speak. She just turned away. The district attorney filed charges against Claire 3 months later: embezzlement, fraud, perjury. She took a plea deal and was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and 5 years probation. She served 11 months. My mother paid for the best lawyers money could buy, but even they couldn't save Claire from the consequences of her own testimony. I didn't go to the sentencing hearing. I'd said everything I needed to say in the civil trial. I didn't need to watch Claire be led away in handcuffs to feel vindicated. The truth coming out was enough. The civil judgment bankrupted Claire. She had to sell everything to try to pay even a fraction of what she owed me. The luxury apartment, the car, the jewelry, all of it went to auction. I bought some of it, actually, not out of spite, but because a few pieces had been my father's, things that should have stayed in the family. A watch he'd worn every day, a painting he'd loved, small things that meant nothing to Claire but everything to me. My mother tried to protect her, tried to hide assets and transfer property, but my lawyers caught every attempt. The judgment was enforceable and comprehensive. In the end, my mother had to sell the family house to cover her own legal fees and to keep from being held in contempt for hiding Claire's assets. I didn't buy the house at auction. I thought about it, imagined what it would feel like to own the place where I'd grown up feeling like a stranger. But I didn't need that weight. A developer bought it and tore it down to build condos. Maybe that was fitting. Some things aren't worth preserving. The strangest thing happened after it was all over. Family members who'd cut me off started reaching out. My father's brother called and apologized for believing Claire's lies. Cousins sent awkward emails and Facebook messages. People who'd been so quick to judge me based on a viral video suddenly wanted to make amends now that court documents proved I'd been telling the truth all along. I accepted some apologies and ignored others. I learned that forgiveness isn't something you owe people, especially people who were willing to condemn you without knowing the full story. Some relationships are worth repairing, and some are just broken beyond fixing. My mother never apologized. She never reached out, never acknowledged what had happened or her role in it. The last I heard, she'd moved to Arizona to live near her sister. She sends Christmas cards to Claire in prison. She doesn't send them to me. Claire writes me letters sometimes. They come every few months, handwritten on prison stationery. At first they were angry, blaming me for her incarceration, calling me vindictive. Then they became self-pitying, talking about how hard prison was, how she'd lost everything. The recent ones are different. They're almost reflective, like she's finally starting to understand what she did and why. The most recent letter arrived last month. In it, Claire wrote, "I've been thinking about when we were kids, before everything got so complicated. Do you remember how we used to make up secret languages and tell each other everything? I think that's when I was happiest. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even forgive myself. But I wanted you to know that I remember when we were sisters, really sisters, before I destroyed it. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger. I'm sorry I let their favoritism turn me into someone cruel. You deserved a better sister than me." I haven't responded to that letter yet. I'm not sure I will. Some apologies come too late, after too much damage. But I kept the letter. Maybe that means something. Maybe it doesn't. As for me, I'm rebuilding. My design business is thriving now that I can focus on it properly. I bought a small house in Pasadena with a garden and good light. I adopted a dog, a rescue mutt named Charlie, who follows me everywhere and doesn't care about my inheritance or my family drama. I started dating again, carefully this time, with better boundaries and clearer eyes. The money from my father's trust has given me security and freedom. But that's not what saved me. What saved me was deciding to stop accepting other people's narratives about who I was. What saved me was choosing to fight for the truth even when it was ugly and hard and expensive. What saved me was understanding that sometimes love isn't enough, that you can care about people and still need to protect yourself from them. I think about my father sometimes and wonder what he'd say about how everything unfolded. Part of me wishes he'd been brave enough to confront Claire while he was alive, to set boundaries, to force my mother to acknowledge her favoritism. But another part of me understands that he did what he could. He gave me the resources to fight back. He left me a letter that validated every hurt I'd felt growing up. He tried to balance the scales in the only way he knew how. I visited his grave last week, first time in over a year. I brought flowers and sat on the grass next to his headstone. I told him about the trials, about Claire's conviction, about finally winning. I told him I understood why he'd created the trust, and that I was grateful, and that I was okay. I also told him I forgave him for not being perfect, for not protecting me better when I was young, for taking until the end of his life to acknowledge the damage. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it does mean releasing the anger that keeps you chained to the past. The sun was setting when I left the cemetery, painting everything gold and orange and beautiful. I drove home with the windows down and the music loud, and for the first time in years, I felt light. The weight of family obligation and the desperate need for their approval had finally lifted. I was free, not because I'd won money or lawsuits, but because I'd stopped needing them to love me to know I was worthy of love. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you become the ones you need protection from. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve. And sometimes the only way to survive is to walk away from the people who are drowning and save yourself, even when everything in you wants to keep reaching for them. I don't know what happens next with Claire or my mother. Maybe Claire will come out of prison changed. Maybe my mother will finally confront her own role in how our family fractured. Maybe someday we'll sit down together and have the honest conversations we should have had years ago. Or maybe we won't. Maybe some relationships are just meant to teach you what you don't want in your life. Either way, I'm okay. More than okay, actually. I'm building a life that's mine, filled with people who see me and value me, and treat me with the respect every person deserves. I'm learning what healthy love looks like, what boundaries mean, what it feels like to be chosen rather than tolerated. The airport video is still online. Sometimes people recognize me from it, usually with sympathy, now that the full story came out. I don't mind. It's part of my history, part of the journey that brought me here. I'm not ashamed of it anymore. I learned something important through all of this. Revenge isn't about destroying the people who hurt you. It's about refusing to let them destroy you. It's about standing up and telling the truth even when it's painful. It's about fighting for yourself with the same ferocity you'd fight for someone you love. And here's the thing about the truth. It might take time. It might cost you everything. It might hurt like hell to bring into the light. But in the end, the truth is the only thing that sets you free. Because at the end of the day, the best revenge is living well, loving yourself, and refusing to carry someone else's poison in your heart.